New comics. Hi, welcome to Garage Geek. So after my vacation, a comic delivery was waiting for me from DCBS. Now there was a lot of collected editions like Marvel Epic Collections, and I could show off all the comics, but what I decided to do was to start reading these comics and go over them in the fashion of many YouTubers like Sleepy Reader and Larry's Library. So of course I'm not doing anything original, but what I am doing that's different is that I'm going over comics that you can actually go out and buy right now. I'm hoping that you'll see something that you like and you might go out and support these comics. And one of the reasons I want you to support them is because 4 of them are facsimile editions. I want facsimiles to be very popular so that they will keep making them. So the first comic that I'm going to go over is Into the Unbeing. Now this is from Dark Horse Comics and it's number 1 and this is part 1. As I show pictures of this comic, you're going to see that the art style is very cartoony, but it really fits this comic. It's in a post-apocalyptic future where there is a science team of 4 people who go out and investigate a seismic anomaly. In many ways, the art style is very European, but in some cases, the art reminded me of John Romita Jr. So it's kind of a mix, but it really does work for that. As for the storyline, this is only part 1, but it really reminded me of one of my favorite novels, which is Annihilation. I think we're getting a lot of these kind of stories. A lot of things have reminded me of Annihilation recently. But that's something good because Annihilation, along with this comic, creates a sense of mystery. And so for a first issue, I'm going to say that this comic is a 4 out of 5. The next comic is a facsimile edition of Mad number 1. Now, Mad magazine, I guess, started as a comic, and this is number 1. And even though I've had this a couple of times in different editions, I've never read it. I highly enjoyed this. So on the cover, they mention Melvin, and that, I think, is going to be a running gag throughout this comic. The first story in this comic is called Hoo Ha, and it's a traditional 2 people coming across haunted mansion. But what sets us apart is the humor and the art. For example, in this panel, you see 2 headlights driving up a road, and even though it's just a bunch of line work, it's really evocative. There's a lot of detail in these drawings, and the character expressions are funny, the situations are funny. There's a lot of words written to give us onomatopoeia. Not scary at all, but in the typical EC style, it does end with a twist. The next story is called Blob. Oh, each story is supposedly from a different department at EC. The first one was from the Terror department. The next one is called Blobs, and it's from the Science Fiction department. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, this story is really prescient. There's a lot of ideas in this that still ring true today. So this talks about the advancement of technology, and then it goes through the history of humankind with technology, and there's going to be a lot of really sexist elements in this story, but they're honestly quite amusing. Unless maybe you're a woman, then you might not find them amusing. But the art in this story is really, really good. So one friend is very worried and he goes and visits another one. He starts talking about technology and the dangers of technology, and I want to read you one little part. He's going through the history. They would go to friends' houses, and instead of talking to the friends, they would look at television machines for a few hours, and then they would ride home. How does that make sense, Melvin? Seems like it's gotten worse since the 1950s. So like many of these older comics, there are stories, and none of them were really worth reading, but they weren't horrible either. In this one, Enter Cosmic McMoon, it plays with the idea of pictures that have a picture within a picture within a picture, and they keep going toward infinity. The next one is called Pro Vadis, that takes place in ancient Rome, and this one has a lot of play on words. And then the next story comes from the crime department, and that one is called Genefs. So this is a crime duo, one giant and bumbling, and the other one supposedly intelligent, but not really. And of course they commit a crime, and it doesn't go right. The fourth story is called Varmint, and this one comes from the Western Department. And this is a play on a man seeking revenge for the death of his friend, and he's searching and searching for the person who killed his friend. One thing that really made me laugh is the name of one of his victims is called Kick Him in the Belly, Kelly. So this one ends with a kind of funny twist that I won't spoil. And that is the end of Mad Magazine #1. Overall, this is a very fun read. I would give this 5 out of 5 just for the historic significance in the art. It's a very fun and enjoyable read, but for the casual reader, I would say that this is probably a 4 out of 5. This is not a reprint, but the next comic is Uncle Scrooge and the Infinity Dime. Now, what this does is it has a new story, but it also reprints a story that inspired this. And I thought how they were connected was pretty neat. Now, the cover, I believe, is by Alex Ross, which is one of the reasons why I bought this, but I'm really glad that I did. Now, the artwork in the main story is nice. It's written by Jason Aaron. He gives a write-up of why he loves Scrooge McDuck. And then this is going to be a play off of a lot of ideas in recent comics and movies about multiple parallel universes and the Infinity Stones from the Avengers movies and Thanos. The art in here is very nice, especially I really like full pages and the splash pages. But honestly, when you have something like this and then in the back of it, you put the story that it refers to, you just can't compare. The original story and art is just classic, and it's a real good reason why you would buy this book. It has a reprint of Christmas on Bear Mountain. The art in this is just so good. Now, I have one quibble about the art. Modern comics on the glossy paper look really good, but the older comics, this doesn't look bad. But I have another comic where they printed it more on newspaper type paper, and I could see how much better the art is on this type of paper versus the glossy. Now, of course, it still looks great, but I could tell a difference. And in some places, it was more noticeably fuzzy, whereas the paper that's more newspaper type, I guess I shouldn't say newspaper. This would be glossy versus matte. The matte paper, I guess, the ink would sink in more and make it more clear. Having said that, though, this is definitely worth buying. The art in this is beautiful. So this is a classic Christmas story where Scrooge McDuck won't give Donald and his nephews anything for Christmas unless they've passed courage test. And I won't spoil it. It's a lot of fun. It's so cool. And then in the back, you have the people who worked on this pick their favorite Uncle Scrooge covers and talk about why. That was really nice in and of itself. Now, I hope that Marvel will continue to do things like this, because getting this older issue juxtaposed with the more modern one and seeing how the more modern writer, Jason Aaron, builds off of or gives an alternate reality of a past story was really pretty cool. I'm going to give this comic a 4 out of 5, but if you're an Uncle Scrooge fan, you definitely would bump that up to a 5 out of 5. The last two that I have are reprints of very old comics. So the first one is Military Comics. This one has, I believe, the first appearance of Black Hawk. And it says 2 books in one, but there's actually a lot of stories. Of everything that I'm showing you today, this one was my favorite. This one was a joy to read. Now, this is more like 4 comics in one. It will take you a while to get through it, but with a cover price of $6.99, that makes it worth it. The first story in here is Black Hawk, and you've got this really cool splash page. There's going to be a caveat when you're reading this. It's all about military propaganda, but it's still such a fun comic. So we get the origin of Black Hawk and how there's a series of events that start him on a path to vengeance. Throughout this, he is going to go after a Nazi general because of something that happened earlier in the comic. Now, in the middle of this, Black Hawk all of a sudden goes to an island, and he's got a compound there, which is pretty funny because he didn't have any military backing. He throws together a plane, and then all of a sudden he's got this militarily fortified island that has elevators, disappearing forts, and more. Now, in this comic, we have the idea of how people in the Allies are very honorable, but people in the Axis are very dishonorable. So Black Hawk is not going to kill his enemy outright. He's going to allow him to be in a fair dog fight with plane. But of course, the Nazi is going to cheat. Black Hawk will emerge triumphant, and he's going to win the girl over. The next story is called Loops and Bank of the Red Dragon Squad. Now, this seems to be like an Abbott and Costello type of joke duo. They break the rules and they're thrown out of the military, but of course, they're going to come back and prove that they're worthy. The next one is called The Blue Tracer, and I think that this is probably going to be my favorite story. He's rescued by an Australian who's nicknamed Boomerang Jones. They show This character is pretty hilarious. Number one, he's got like freckles all over his body, and his forte is throwing a boomerang. Iron Man style, they take some old planes that are on the island, and they make this tank plane torpedo that is all in one. I don't know how they came up with the military intelligence and the technological advances to make this tank that could turn into a plane that can become a missile and smash through walls. But it's pretty hilarious. Also, I'm wondering, like, Boomerang Jones just starts throwing his boomerang around and he saves the day. And I'm wondering if this character is offensive. Ben Rankins, I want to know, what do you think about Boomerang Jones? Now, they smash through a volcano. It's pretty hilarious because all the natives, they get this, like, tide of lava that comes in and kills them all. And they're all, like, sitting there with their heads and their hands and their feet sticking out of the lava. It doesn't even look like lava. It's kind of blue. But in the next picture, yeah, the whole place burns. They get away with the girl and saving the day, and it's all pretty hilarious. So the next story is Archie Atkins, Desert Scout. Now, this one has some questionable images. There's an Ahmed character, and his face is just weird, and I'm going to leave it at that. Now, I had a lot of fun with this because there's a goat in it, and this goat helps the people. At the beginning, they're tied to a stake, and this goat, whenever he sees a guy who's bent over, he goes and rams that guy. So the goat rams the villain, and the villain, when he gets rammed, accidentally throws his machete, and it cuts through the ropes and frees everybody. It's so ridiculous. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of bent over guys in this comic. I was kind of enjoying it. One thing that I did really like is at the end of the story, the goat rams the general or, someone like that. And the men take responsibility. They don't tell on the goat because the general would kill the goat and eat it. So they protect the goat and they get punished for it. So, hey, I was actually very happy about that. The next is called Shot and Shell. This is another duo of inept people who really want to contribute to the war effort. This is like a theme throughout all of these stories. Everyone wants to do their best for the war effort. And so we've got this, I think they're really making fun of French people. He's short, he has a large vocabulary, but he's incredibly stupid in a way. Yeah, he's just totally naive. And he gets a young sidekick, and they hobble together a plane, and they, help save the day through their bungling. The next is the Navy section with Yankee Eagle. It's got a beautiful splash page. And this is where a bunch of Nazis pretend they're sailors and they take over a ship. And they put everybody on an island. Now that did not make any sense. Because later they decided they're going to go back and blow up the island and kill everybody on it. But they would have just killed everybody in the first place. But whatever. So you've got a rich son who is able to be like Animal Man. He controls animals and he could screech like them and they understand them. And he's very much like Animal Man and Batman rolled into one. He doesn't want his father to know that he's not bungling his rich father. But of course he ends up saving the day with his animals through a battle on the sea. The next story is Death Patrol. We have a pretty neat thing that happens at the beginning. We have two stories going on at the same time to bring the characters together. So you've got a wealthy playboy who meets up with a group of 5 bungling escaped cons. He rather sillily convinces them, instead of hijacking the plane that he owns and is on, to instead join the war effort. They do, and it's very much like Suicide Squad, and by the end one of them is going to die, and you get the sense that every issue that one of the people on the Death Patrol is going to die. It's going to be kind of their thing. Next we got a one-pager called Sabotage, and it was just a bunch of funny one-page jokes. And then we have Miss America. This one was beautifully drawn. It's so silly. A female reporter falls asleep next to the Statue of Liberty, and the Statue of Liberty comes to life and gives her magic powers. So the Statue of Liberty actually has magic powers, and then the Statue of Liberty donates those powers to this woman so she can help fight crime, further the war cause. Of course, she's a woman and no one believes her. and they all treat her with disrespect. But of course, she's the one that's able to save the day. I mean, she has magic powers, so why shouldn't she? She turns people into trees. She makes them disappear. She goes from one place to another by teleporting. In this story, you also have the idea of spies, and that goes throughout this book. There's so many spies who have infiltrated different aspects of American life and government. So there was a 2-page Gone with the Draft, and I actually read most of it, but I got tired of it because it was all military propaganda. The final story is called Q-Boat, and this has Captain Foghorn, Bob, Dick, and Freckles. Though this made no sense, and the Germans, quite frankly, look like monsters. And of course, we got the fighting spirit of the American and the British go down. And then, of course, the Germans want to kill every last one of them, and they won't pick up any survivors. And this is going to be juxtaposed later when the Americans attack the Germans and they pick up all the survivors. We're not introduced to the characters until like halfway through the story, and it's basically a couple of kids who can outthink and outsmart military generals, and they end up saving the day. That's another theme that runs through these comics, is how children can really help the war effort. So this comic, Military Comics, $6.99, I'm going to say this was an absolute joy to read. Just turning the pages and looking at the art, seeing all how the art is different and the layouts, this is absolutely worth the money, and I'm going to give this one 5 out of 5. Now, the last comic I'm going to go over is Dynamic Comics, and this one is from the Facsimile edition, so I had to special order this one. This seems like it was printed in a photocopy printer, but I don't mind this at all. Of all the comics that I'm going to show you today, this was my least favorite. You can tell the art just isn't as good, the story isn't as good. First of all, let's take a good look at this cover. I mean, that cover is pretty awesome. So the first story is called Yankee Boy. It's a child who has Captain America-like powers. He finds a plot of Nazis who are blowing up American factories. And of course, I'm not sure if they're Nazis, but they're definitely un-American types. They're trying to stop American factory production. Now, what was really surprising is the violence and the suggestion of it. Says, bring the girl in, Toad. The boy needs lessons. See, buddy, I'll slit her throat if you don't work hard on your lessons. Just a tiny scratch to let you hear her scream. If you make a move, I'll blow this kid's brains out. That's pretty violent stuff, holding a gun to a kid's head and saying that you're going to blow his brains out. So this must have been before the comics code. Of course, Yankee Boy, is that his name? Yeah, Yankee Boy comes in, saves the day. Of course, he doesn't get any credit, and his father, when he comes home, his father says, man, I wish you could be more like Yankee Boy. You're a disappointment. And he can't say anything about it. Next, we have a one-pager called Little Arthur, and this is just a one-page gag, which was actually pretty good. Next, we have Dynamic Man. The splash page isn't that great. The art isn't that great, but it's so much fun. Dynamic Man has to stop a fiendish plot of an evil wizard who can turn into a bat, and he can mesmerize people. That's going to hurt America. But of course, Dynamic Man wins in the end. There's a full-page story of a character named 8-Ball, and he's going to appear in another story later. It's a very silly story about a race and what they do in order to win the race. The next story is called Lucky Coin, spelled C-O-Y-N-E, and this one was pretty funny because a reporter has to go to a local state sanatorium, and man, the words that they use in this are pretty non-PC. The case is called The Case of the Screaming Idiots. I've got to run off and look over a nut factory. Yeah, I'm off to visit a bunch of half-wits. So when he gets there, they've been waiting for him, and they attack him, and it's hilarious because he says, the guy who attacks him says, blood, I'll have blood. And the guy's on the ground saying, good grief. And it just reminded me of Charlie Brown. There's this picture, and it's just awful. Not very sensitive. And then we have another one-pager called Boss of the Ranch, and it's actually pretty funny, where the boss is bossing around this one guy all day, taking advantage of him. But don't worry, when that guy goes home, he gets it from the wife. The next story is called Master Key. This guy has an accident that allows him to have special laser powers with his eye. He can see through things, and he finds a plot. It's underneath the Abraham Lincoln Monument. So he goes inside, fights everybody there. There's a bunch of Nazis under there. Next, we have a full page advertisement for stamp-ograms, and there's a lot of interesting and fun items on this page. But it's really funny because there's supposedly a drawing of Barbara Stanwyck, and this looks nothing like Barbara Stanwyck. There's also a really bad racial joke. The next story is called The Echo, and we have this really cool opening. So this is very Scooby-Doo, where these people go to like a mansion where there's all these disappearances, and they even, I think, use the word meddling in the story once. The penultimate story is called Yankee Doodle Jones. And we got this weird splash page, and this one is very much like Captain America and Bucky. We actually get their origin story, and they get like the super serum. They're able to become super strong. And of course, they're going to be fighting a bunch of Nazis. They even meet the real Uncle Sam, who sends them on a mission. There is a witch in this, and it was pretty interesting. The witch goes to the military barber, and she collects the hair, and then she uses that hair through witchcraft to strangle her victims. And it's so cool. I actually thought that was really cool. And she chants, "Tighten, tighten, band of hair. Strangle your owner, no matter where." The witch gets her comeuppance in a brutal fashion because she is strangled to death. Again, there is a story of 8-Ball. The last story in this book is called Dan Hastings, and this one is more of a Flash Gordon type story. Now, this one is so bad. Now, there are these monsters, and they're aliens, and they're called heathens, and they have these giant noses, and they're all like hideous. So I'm hoping that this isn't anti-Semitic. They call the people from the other planet heathens, and for some reason the king falls in love with an Earth woman, and he doesn't like the woman from his own planet. He thinks they're too ugly, and he goes to Earth, and it's hilarious. They come and they look like models. They stand there in their shorts. Then they're able to capture the American beauty and take her back to their planet. Now that I've gone through these 5 comics, I did try not to spoil them. I did give some plot outlines, and I've shown you a lot of art from these books. But I'm hoping that if you see something in these comics, then you will go to your local comic book shop and pick one of them up, because these are recent editions and they are available now. So if there's anything that you saw here and you like, please go ahead and leave a comment. I want to thank everybody out there. I'm warning you to please be better than me, and to remember to always be more intelligent.